Jake, who are the big names post-World War II in human performance and fitness, and how did that relate to our epidemic with back pain and how to fix it?
Yes. Back pain is one of the chronic diseases caused by chronic inactivity. Chronic inactivity is the cause, one of the reasons why we have back pain, because we become more susceptible to injury to the back. Now, Krauss-Weber used a postural fitness test, which was really a back pain test in part, to determine the physical fitness of people in the United States, kids in the United States. That test was very heavily orientated to as a postural test, of which if you had a decay of the postural tree and its response to activity, and you had inability or injury, you would come down with back pain. Krauss-Weber's was the testers, but there were other of the Krauss-Weber test. There was a doctor by the name of Travell, and she would go to Kennedy and inject trigger points in order to relieve pain. Bonnie Pruden was one of the assistants to Krauss-Weber at that time. After a while, it was determined that to give Hans Krauss a chance to reduce Kennedy's pain, and he was unfortunate to have gross chronic pain all of his life. Hans Krauss, instead of injecting the trigger point areas, the failed areas that were rebelling against gravity, gave him exercises to strengthen his body, and he responded fantastically to the exercise. So it's bringing in the fact that we have recovery of back pain from movement and exercise. Now there are times when you have to have injections, or have to have a disc removed, or have to have a fusion, or any of these physical procedures that have developed since 1953 until the marvels of medicine in 2015. But there is one common denominator in every single one of these doctors' procedures. The procedure itself, guided rest, medication, and a recommended regime of physical therapy to get you moving and then to keep active. Now, back in the early days, Springfield, Massachusetts was a YMCA college. Dr. Karpovich was the professor of physical education at that time. Dr. Arthur Steinhaus was the professor at another YMCA college called George Williams College. And I was a research assistant to Dr. Steinhaus in the 50s to 51. There was another doctor at that time, Dr. Cureton. Now, these three physicians, Cureton studied under Karpovich for a while and then set up his own research lab at the University of Chicago. That was followed later on by Cooper, who made the term aerobic fitness. Dr. Karpovich divided the physical responses into strength, flexibility, agility, power, balance, and endurance. Later on came reaction time, and so on. Dr. Steinhaus was a spirit, body, and mind, just a very kind, wonderful old man. And he emphasized the physiology of body recovering from fatigue to regaining strength during exercise. He was also one of the main doctors who convinced the American Medical Society that a punch to the nose injures the brain, and they removed boxing from high school. Curitin was did a lot of studies with Karpovich, and one of his main points that I remember him about is his work in swimming and his work with the physiology, exercise, and endurance relating to disease. So Curitin, Karpovich, and Steinhaus, all three were intimately involved with physical education effect on health. Now, prior to that time, in 1934, there were Cozen and Nielsen. These two men developed the finest physical education, physical fitness test, bar none, that has ever been given. They tested 89,000 children in Sacramento, and the test was compared against a known fitness test of about 9.8 coefficient of being legitimate. And they did a lot of research with physical education as it related to certain diseases. So all the way in 1950, and slightly before, you had people studying what the effect of movement was on the body. Now, I mentioned the value of physical education by having physical education, but the effect of physical education and the effect of movement to restore joints once that joint has been the joint muscles has been injured, has a profound effect on the evolution of the recovery. There have been a number of physicians since that time, so I do not want to say that the only physicians we had was Steinhaus, Curitin, Karpovich, and Cozen and Nielsen, because there's Cooper and then a whole host of other very fine researchers since that time. But these were the people who brought to the American attention the fact that movement creates function. Function stimulates structure. If you don't move, your structure is affected by it. So people who were chronically injured and were chronically active become invalids. So when they first came out in, I don't know, I think it's somewhere around 1967, Dr. Clifford called me and said, well, I just had my first step today, and had him up and walking the next day. So he did a hip replacement that was just getting started, and he got the person up the next day and put weight to help sink that replacement into place. And the recovery time was such that rather than spending 3 to 5 weeks in the hospital, he started sending people home in just a few days. So now note the fact that you have children and they are not in the hospital for 5 weeks. They're up and moving and either back to work or what have you. Back pain programs have come out, and some have been popularized by the William Flexion and McKinsey program, and yoga, different parts of yoga now. They all have one common denominator. It's a method of moving the person more than they are at the time. The tissue, an inert tissue doesn't heal where it needs to be massaged. You need to bring oxygen. It has to go through a metabolical process. It has to meet every option. Every action is met with an opposite and equal reaction to strengthen. And this is accomplished by a very healthy program of physical fitness. And if you want to avoid injury, one, you avoid the things that give you an injury. If you're an old man, you don't want to be climbing up a stairs. But I'm 86 now, and I eat well. My wife and I go for 1 to 2 miles 4 or 5 times a week. We are keeping active. So 80% of the American people or more are not really physically active. And you have to say, if you don't go out and walk a mile a day, how do you expect your body to function properly? How do you expect you're going to be physically fit and resist diseases if all you do is go to work and sit and come home and watch the television and get on the computer and do the computing, and then go out maybe every 3 weeks or so on a vacation and move around a little bit? That doesn't cut the mustard. It's not going to give you a it's about lifestyle changes that have to be made, and those lifestyle changes came from chronic inactivity to being able to repair and return quickly to activities of daily living through the procedures that these doctors recommended at the time. Now, those procedures have been refined. They've been out there. You've been told. Your doctor will tell you to do them. And articles, there's enough articles to mention the effect of physical education on your heart, in longevity on heart, and the other diseases. And then you have to decide: how long do I want to really live? Do I want to move and live longer, or do I want to be inactive and die sooner?